Hey, welcome to the Fantasy Football Game Plan. Week 1 reminded us why DFS is chaos, lightning delays, chalk crumbled, and our Burrow Chase safe stack totaled just 13.4 points.
Yeah, so today we're going to separate what's actually noise, what's signal from week 1. We're going to do a quick review, then we'll dive into the week 2 stacks and leverage plays. So make sure to hit subscribe and leave us a comment of your favorite plays of the week. Let's jump in. We have a lot of games to cover.
Let's kick it off with what surprised us in week 1. Week 1
So,
was a dud.
yeah, we had a lot of unders in these games. We had a lot of weather delays. I think during the main slate, like that 12 game slate, only one game hit the over. And of course, it was the one game I bet the under, but it was that Pittsburgh Jets game, which no one saw coming. Everyone thought that one was going to be a dud, and turns out it was every other game.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. Those lightning delays seemed to just halt scoring. We also had that lightning delay on Thursday night, and the teams came back, and it was the same situation. Just nothing happens after a lightning delay.
Do
Hopefully, we're
we?
going to avoid the lightning delays this week, but it looks like the Eagles at Kansas City has a chance of thunderstorms, and it's going to be 92 degrees there.
Spoiler alert: we're really not expecting a lot from that game. That could even just be another strike against it, another red flag, because all momentum, and it's like I feel like the players, once they go back into the locker room for those weather delays, it is hard for them to get going again. But let's talk about some of those wide receivers, because it was almost like if you had a first round wide receiver last week, you were pretty disappointed.
You were, yeah. We were all over the Jacksonville Carolina game that ended up really bad. In the end, I ended up going with Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow just to be safe, which didn't work out either. Who were you most surprised about?
Yeah, Brian Thomas Jr., I was expecting a lot from him. He ended up with only one catch and 11 yards. Nico, I was also pretty high on, and he finished with just 25 yards on 3 receptions. And then the one I was kind of avoiding, but was still troubling to see, was Terry McLaurin. Only 2 receptions for 27 yards in their win against the Giants. Do any of these wide receivers worry you long term? Is there anything you saw week 1 that gives you pause for the season?
I think I would be most concerned in Nico Collins' case and the Texans. The Texans, without that run game, they just look completely stalled and it didn't go real well. The Texans just look like they're in trouble to me. How about
Yeah,
you?
no, I would agree. They had one of the worst offensive lines last year, and that's still going to plague them this year. They got rid of their one good left tackle, and they got just kind of blitzed by the Rams. So I think they're kind of in for it. We don't have them on this slate, so luckily we get like another game of sample to see if it was just week 1 yips, and they're going to kind of work it out. They didn't. The Texans never play in the preseason, so maybe they just need to shake off that rust. But it did not look good week 1.
So these players that just didn't deliver, that are so far below their projections, do you go right back at them this week? Do you expect people to get back to average? And those that blew away their expectations in week 1, Aaron Rodgers, are we going back down to reality?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's like we want to be open to the new information. And I think there's some players where we want to follow those trends, and especially if they're promising young players like Tyler Warren. I was really liked what I saw from the game in Indy. But these wide receivers, especially the ones that we know that are great, Jamar Chase getting 25 yards, we know he's better than that. We know that passing attack is going to find its legs. So I'm fine going right back to them. I'm more looking for opportunities, especially those players where what they did week 1 doesn't match up with their opportunities. If there's a couple players with like 7 or 8 targets and they only came down with 1 or 2 of those, I think those are really your opportunities to buy in before DraftKings starts rising their price.
Yeah, cranking the price up. Well, let's jump into our game review. New this week, we've got some new charts that are out there. We'll actually have a link to these charts if you want to view them in the description. You can actually play around and sort by different things. You can sort them by target. You can view these all different sorts of ways. So let us know what you think of them. But I kind of like the heat map so I can quickly see what happened last week. We're going to
Yeah.
kick it off with Jacksonville at Cincinnati. We're going back at the two teams that we both liked in different games last week. And this week, they're going to get to play each other. Cincinnati is favored by 3.5, and the line is 48.5. That's the highest one we've got. We don't have anyone over 50 this week. Did they like dial it back a little bit because we weren't hitting those overs, maybe?
They did a little bit. This game also started at 50 and a half, and it's been bet down to 48 and a half. So people are all in on the unders. I'm actually really excited for this game. I think it should be fun. We should get high pass volume, and I don't really trust either of these defenses. I mean, Cincinnati, it took wide receivers literally throwing the ball to the cornerback for them to get a couple turnovers, and Carolina just couldn't do anything against Jacksonville. They look terrible. So I think against better passing attacks, maybe they can find their legs against these matchups.
I think so too. I really like going at this game. You know, Burrow and Chase can't be that bad 2 weeks in a row. So I'm expecting them to get back to their average, and that means they're going to have a great game. One of the things that surprised me last week was, well, not just the Tank Bigsby getting traded to Philadelphia, but the usage of Travis Etienne in that game. He had 143 yards. He was their back. You know, we spent so much of the preseason talking about how Bayshaw Tootin was going to take over and at least Tank Bigsby's role. Well, now he's gone. Is this Etienne's, backfield, or are we going to
It's
see more of Tootin?
it's looking like ETN right now. Maybe Tuden later in the year, but we really want Liam Cohen's running back. When he was in Tampa Bay, like Rashad White and Bucky Irving were both top 12 running backs in some weeks. So that's a very valuable position. And Travis Etienne looked good. He looked explosive in those runs. He looked good in those carries. So maybe it was just an injury that was kind of hampering him last season. He didn't really work with that scheme, and he's really going to excel on this Liam Cohen offense. I think he is kind of undervalued. I think the other running back on the other side of the field is also undervalued. Chase Brown was a true workhorse last week. He was the only running back that took carries for that team. And he was second in the NFL in touches, only to CMC, because, of course, CMC gets over 30 touches with his calf injury. But Chase Brown had 23 opportunities. So I think he is
He
also a
did.
fun play.
I like him. My problem with Chase Brown is his cost. DraftKings this week bumped him up a couple hundred. He's now at 6,800, and he still only had 43 yards. And when we're at that at least 6,500 mark, I need you to be getting the 100-yard bonus to really make it worth having you, because you've got to score 30 points. And the only way you're going to score 30 points is hitting that bonus. And I'm just not sure that Chase Brown gets that dedicated rushing.
Yeah.
He got the touchdown and he'll get that work, but to pay for that price, I'm not sure he's there.
I do believe that he can be very valuable in the passing game in certain game plans. If teams are going to line up in zone coverage and just try to take away the deep threats with Chase and Higgins and leave the kind of check down repeatedly so we can watch a game where he can rack up 6 or 7 receptions, I think those can really bump up his fantasy output. And he is going to be their goal line option when they get close in the end zone.
Yeah, I do. I he can he might be able to do it. I think he's going to struggle a little bit at this cost, but I think in the future maybe we'll see his cost come down. On the Jacksonville side, how'd you like Travis Hunter?
Yeah, Travis Hunter, he is their full time wide receiver. So he looked critical to their game plan. They're giving him design touches. He really didn't do too much on defense. So I'm really only viewing him as a wide receiver moving forward. And I think he's playable too. He didn't
Yeah,
do that well, but his involvement in the offense was promising, especially for a rookie.
yeah, he had 8 targets, which was more than Brian Thomas Jr. had, but this whole game just didn't live up to expectations for whatever reason. What kind of stack do you like in this game?
Yeah, the one thing about this game is I think it's going to be by far the most popular game on the slate. I think with this high over under and especially getting a affordable price with Jamar Chase, I think you're going to see a lot of Jamar Chase, a lot of Joe Burrow, and probably T. Higgins to accompany them. So I'm trying to find ways to get different. And the ways I want to get different is either lean in even more to this game and instead of just have a Burrow Chase stack, going fully in, getting two Jacksonville options with three Cincinnati options, and just say this is the game. The other games fail and hit the under. So with like a Chase, Higgins, Burrow stack, tacking on Brendan Strange, tacking on either Hunter or Brian Thomas Jr.
Okay. I've definitely been stacking this game. I've got one at the end that we'll see that where I do use the Burrow Chase stack. I haven't gone crazy on it because there's so many other really good options on this slate that I felt the need to pull in a lot of pieces from other games. But I understand the situation and the theory of going all in on making this the game. And since there was only one the game last week, it could be a good plan.
The only other way I think you can stack it is maybe to avoid Chase and go Burrow, Chase Brown, and Higgins with a Jacksonville bring back, probably Brian Thomas Jr., and just say so many people are going to be on Chase that he might not even be worth it. If I instead go to like CD Lamb, who is a great wide receiver in his own right, and just say that
Yeah.
Chase doesn't get the touchdown and maybe CD Lamb does, then I get leverage over the entire field that's playing Chase.
I do wonder if there's ever been a multi game stretch that Chase didn't get a touchdown. We'll have to look into that.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to Chicago at Detroit, a rematch of last year's Thanksgiving game. The Bears lost on Monday night. That was a little devastating. Didn't think that was going to happen. And Detroit lost. So both these teams are 0-1. Somebody gets a win on Sunday. Detroit is favored by 6, and the over-under is 47. What do you think?
Yeah, this game, I think it's going to be pretty equal. I also think we're getting the under in this game. We saw kind of an example last week with the Rams Houston game, but when you have the offensive coordinator for a team move to another team and then they play each other, especially early on in the season, now you have the defenses that all through preseason have been scrimmaging their own side and they know how to defend the plays better than anyone. So when you have such similar offensive schemes, I think it does benefit the defense. And I think we'll probably see pretty ineffective teams from Detroit and Chicago. What's your take on it?
I don't know. I don't feel like Caleb Williams is Jared Goff and that these teams have to play different styles. We already talked about how Swift is not Jahmyr Gibbs. So the talent lies in different places with both of these teams. And therefore, I think that the play calling has to be different because of where the talent lies. So I don't know that they're going to, know what the other team is going to do or have that much insight. Obviously, I think the Bears are going to have a little bit more insight on what the Lions are going to do than necessarily the other way around. But can the Bears be pushed to score like they did last week? And we saw Caleb running last week. It was fun. It was fun to see the Bears play.
Yeah. And one thing that's going to be a very important note and just something to keep up with on the injury news is we saw DJ Moore get knocked out late in that game. He had a rib injury. I think it might be one of those pain tolerance things, but we'll see if he continues to be on the injury report and if he has like a questionable tag going into the game. If he is somehow out or even just we think he's going to be limited, then I think it makes Odunze even more of a tempting option. He was already kind of their number one target, and he got their touchdown last game. So it was a little promising to see there. The other thing that I noticed against Chicago is they let Aaron Jones have a couple deep passes. And I think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be circling those routes and kind of scouting those. He only had 31 yards on 10 receptions, but he could easily get that in one play.
He definitely could. And Jahmyr Gibbs is a perfect example of another player who was well below his weekly average that needs things to get right again this week, just like we talked about in the last game. So the Lions could definitely be on that roll to get things going again. Caleb Williams, he is my cheapest quarterback that I want to play. I love that he's rushing more. He had a rushing touchdown, a passing touchdown last week. He looked much better. And at 5,400, he is definitely the cheapest viable quarterback that you can play.
Yeah, I like him. I don't think Goff is really in consideration anymore. That offensive line was worrisome, and maybe it was just the Packers, and maybe the Packers D line is great, which definitely could be part of it. But it was worrisome of how ineffective that running game was against the Packers.
It was. They were definitely not prepared for the Packers. I'm super curious to see what we get out of both of these teams this week. But this isn't really a game. I could maybe do some Gibbs. How much is Gibbs? Gibbs is 7,400. I think I'm just going to stay away at that price.
Yeah, I think he could be a good tournament play to get different. I'm really not stacking up this game. I just kind of like the one-off pieces of maybe an Odunze, maybe a Gibbs.
How about Zacchaeus if Moore's out?
Yeah,
He
Zacchaeus
had
was pretty critical to their offense, even with more in. So
Yeah, he had 7 targets last week, which Odunze only had 9. So if he ends up getting a few more, he is 3,600, and that could be a very cheap player to plug in and be able to spend somewhere else, like defense. We'll have to talk about spending at defense because this is definitely a week where you want to spend up, I think, on defense.
yeah, we also have all the expensive quarterbacks on the slate. Last week we didn't have Jackson, we didn't have Josh Allen as options, we didn't have Hurts. So another place that if you want a bottom of the barrel wide receiver that can still give you some pretty good production, yeah, Zacchaeus, you could do worse.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's move on to the Buffalo Bills at the New York Jets. Jets had that heartbreaking loss last week, and the Bills had the most exciting win. Do the Bills kind of, you know, drop back down to drop a little off the excitement shelf and have that big letdown from having such the big win, or do they roll over the Jets?
I'm kind of thinking it's the second one because I think they're going to rub their eyes and Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry are going to turn into Justin Fields and Brees Hall, and they're going to say, thank God. And um, we can actually show up and not give up 40 points. So I think Buffalo's
That's
defense is
true.
going to look a lot better than they did against the Ravens.
Yeah, the Bills are favored by 6.5. Over under is 46.5. I think it could make that, but I think that the Bills are kind of on a mission this year.
I think I think they are as well, and I think we got very weird stats from the Bills last week. So I'm not really taking last week as any indicator of this week's results because it's going to be so rare that Buffalo is down big and needing to pass that heavily later into the game. I think we're going to
Yeah,
see a lot more positive game scripts for them throughout the season.
I don't see Josh Allen repeating his 2 rushing touchdowns, 2 passing touchdowns, and 394 yards. There's no reason that he should need to in this game. And he's
Yeah.
7,100, so he basically needs to do that to pay for himself. So I'm out on Allen at quarterback.
The other one that I think is going to be most affected by game script is probably Keon Coleman. So in the fourth quarter alone, like I think he had 93 of his 112 yards. He only had 17 in the other 3 quarters. So
Yeah.
I think he is their big play wide receiver. And when there's nothing else open, when you need a play, we're going to force a 50-50 pass to Keon and give him a chance to win it. But if they're ahead or if the offense is just kind of humming, then he's going to have some routes, but he's not going to be their go to wide receiver one like we saw last week.
Yeah, that's very true. So James Cook just popped up on the injury report today, Wednesday. What was his injury?
He had a hamstring injury on today. So it is worrisome to see someone pop up midweek with a hamstring injury. That is normally not a good sign for later in the week.
It isn't. I hate those hamstring injuries. And I was surprised by the lack of Ray Davis in that game. So maybe he gets a chance to enter this week and get some reps.
Yeah, I think if Cook were to miss any time, we'd see kind of a combination of Ray Davis. Ray Davis is mainly just a between the tackles runner, and Ty Johnson is more of their pass catching back and pass protection.
Yeah, so it's going to be hard to figure out who's going to be used here, and there's still cheap options elsewhere, so I'm going to stay away from this. How do you feel on the Jets side of the ball? The Jets, they looked good. It was so upsetting that they actually lost that game because everything that we talked about they were going to do, they did, except play defense.
Yeah.
But their offense looked great. What about Justin Fields? He's up 300 this week to 5,700. Do you like him?
I think he's still very cheap for a running quarterback. And his chance for getting a rushing touchdown is up there with some of the best. And we don't really need as much at a 5,700 price tag. I do think the defense is going to look better, so he's probably not my go-to option, but he's definitely an alternative option. And his chemistry with Garrett Wilson, I mean, they don't really have another wide receiver there, but he is staring down Garrett Wilson, and it's working.
Yeah, Garrett Wilson, 9 targets, 7 receptions, he and a touchdown, and he's 6,500. So it is an option there. I don't know at 6,500 if Garrett Wilson can get there. He's going to have that 100-yard day for sure.
What do you think about Brees? We saw Derrick Henry's success against there. We saw him look very explosive against Pittsburgh. Is there any interest at 6,200?
There's some interest. Brees Hall looked like old Brees Hall. They didn't let him have it at the goal line. They brought in Braylon Allen to, take away that touchdown, which is what's concerning. And at 6,200, I kind of need him to be getting the touchdowns. I think he can get that bonus, but at that cost, I still think we need the touchdowns. And so there's concern there with Braylon Allen coming in and stealing the touchdowns and Justin Fields stealing the touchdowns. So I really like Brees Hall. I think he's doing a great job. But at this price right now, I'm out on Brees Hall for DFS this week.
I am willing to take a chance for him. I mean, 23 targets, you are kind of expected with 23 targets to get in the end zone. And so if he's able to repeat that, especially with how explosive he looks, he doesn't necessarily need the goal line opportunities because he can break it from 25 yards out. So okay. I think he's one of those players that if he hits, he could hit big, but maybe is on he's only going to meet his average projection about 40% of the time.
Well, it's not my favorite game. It's not the one that I've been using. I don't think you used it in your final ones either, but let's move it on to another game we don't like. Philly at Kansas City. We already mentioned the bad weather, 92 degrees, chance of thunderstorms. Philly's favored by 1, and the over-under is 46.5. Kansas City could start the season 0-2.
They could. I wonder when the last time that happened. And honestly, Philly only being a 1-point favorite kind of surprised me in this matchup.
I didn't think Philly looked that great against the Cowboys. I felt like they got a little bit lucky with the whole rain delay situation. A.J. Brown doesn't look like A.J. Brown. Devonta Smith wasn't there either. It was a lot of Dallas Goedert and Saquon Barkley.
Yeah. So
and Jalen Hurts.
It is going to be interesting. Maybe it is going to be a closer game than I expect. I think we're both on the under of 46.5, especially if we get any sort of lightning in this. But Xavier Worthy's injury is kind of the biggest factor for me. Is he going to play? First off, I think they're going to try to get him into a brace, but a shoulder dislocation is one of those things where you're going to have surgery sooner or later. We'll see how mobile he is. His play style doesn't seem like he could really adapt to that brace well either. Who's actually going to fill in the gap there? We saw Hollywood Brown get 16 targets, and Tyquan Thornton also got a couple deep shots. Do you like either of those?
I do like Hollywood Brown. I think he's a good play at 5,200. I don't mind him at all because I think he is going to be highly targeted. I don't see Xavier Worthy playing. If he does play, he's going to be running the route, and they're not going to throw to him. They're just going to use him as a decoy because if he gets hit, it's going to be very easy to dislocate that shoulder again.
Yeah. And he's already not the biggest wide receiver. So, I mean, I think cornerbacks are just going to jam him off the line, knowing that he's kind of injured and dare him to try to run past and catch a deep bomb one-handed.
Yeah. We didn't see a lot out of Travis Kelce either. He was only targeted 4 times. Maybe they go to him a little bit more. I don't know what's going to happen, or it's just going to be all Hollywood Brown because they need to push the ball down the field, and Brown's really their only option. or Thornton?
I do like Tyquan Thornton. They took a couple deep shots late against the Chargers with him, and they were just a little bit off. But he is one of those wide receivers that had a lot of air yards, and they just weren't actually realized. He had 115 air yards, but he only had 41 receiving yards. If we have a full game without Xavier Worthy, and he is that number one deep threat, and they need to catch up against Philly, like if they go down early and Saquon's just running it out, then we could see a couple chances, and we really just need one of those plays to hit at Tyquan Thornton's price tag.
Yeah, at 3,600, he is one of our other bargain wide receivers. So now we got Zacchaeus and we've got Tyquan Thornton, both 3,500 ish range. So you've definitely got some cheap wide receivers on the slate this week to plug in, so you can spend up at other places. How about AJ Brown on the Eagles side?
I still think AJ Brown's hurt. I mean, there was a lot of attention that Jalen Hurts wasn't throwing to him or targeting him, but he really didn't seem to be getting open either, and he wasn't, you know, creating any separations. They weren't really creating plays for AJ Brown, so he seemed more almost like a decoy there. He had an injury he was battling through training camp. I'm off AJ Brown until kind of proven otherwise. I think I'd rather be late to that than continue to get burned week after week.
Yeah, I can see that. What I don't like is Jalen Hurts running the ball as much as he did last week. That can't keep happening. Saquon didn't even get to 100 combined yards either for rushing and receiving. So there are definitely concerns also on the Philly side, which I think is why this is a 1 point game and not more. Because while there are concerns on Kansas City that are glaring, there's like hidden concerns on Philadelphia that we're still unsure of. They even brought in Tank Bigsby this week because Will Shipley broke his rib, so they need a backup running back. We'll see how quickly he gets incorporated, because they were giving it to Shipley. They were running him a bit as well. He had a big run for 20 yards during that game. Are you taking any chances here?
And we'll see if Tank Bigsby gets worked in at all either, because they said he was brought in primarily to just be a kick returner.
They said that, and then they announced Will Shipley's injury too. So I don't
Yeah.
quite believe that. You don't go giving up fifth round picks either for a kick returner. The only thing that I really liked out of here was Dallas Goedert and his 7 targets. I thought were great. And if we do have injuries to AJ Brown, and Devonta Smith didn't even look like himself either, then maybe we see more Dallas Goedert. And
Yeah,
he's sitting at 3,800.
we saw that Kansas City was kind of committed to stopping the run last week, and it was really those possession wide receivers and tight ends that kind of shredded them. So I think that is the spot for Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert to shine.
Yeah, my pieces out of this game are Hollywood Brown at 5,200 and 16 targets is hard to turn down. And then Dallas Goedert, 3,800. But that's about all I'm really interested in.
So let's get to one game that I think we are a little bit more excited about. Cleveland versus Baltimore. Baltimore is 11.5 point favorites, and it is a 45.5 point game total. Do you
Are
think
we
they
excited
cover?
about this one?
I kind of am, at least for Baltimore. How many times are we going to get Baltimore off of a loss? And they looked really good. Even with the loss, they looked very dominant on Sunday night.
This is like deja vu of last season, though. Baltimore did the same exact thing. Week 1, they lost badly to Kansas City. I guess it wasn't so badly, but they lost to Kansas City in week 1. And then that was in an away game. And then they turn around and come home and they played the Raiders. And we thought that was going to be a spanking too. And they lost to the Raiders in Baltimore. It makes me not trust this game. It has happened before, but can lightning strike twice, so to speak?
Yeah, maybe, but the way that Derrick Henry was looking, I think we can conclude that Father Time has not caught up to him yet. He still looked so good against the Bills, and I think he has a lot more explosive rushes back in him this season.
I don't I don't know how Baltimore lost this. I also fell asleep. I'm not in practice to stay up that late on the East Coast for these games. And it was, a 15-point game. So I went to bed early, and I think it was more Josh Allen just willing his win than the Baltimore offense losing this game. I don't know what the Baltimore defense was doing, but they've got to bounce back a little bit here against Cleveland. Cleveland, even Cincinnati handled Cleveland. So if the Cincinnati defense can handle Cleveland, then Baltimore better be able to do it. Do you want to play anybody in DFS?
Honestly, I'm leaning towards Henry, but I think Lamar is still a great option because we want those rushing quarterbacks. He is too cheap. He is like 7K, and it just doesn't really make sense for Lamar's like career and just what he does on average. But I'm kind of leaning more towards Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry at home as heavy favorites. That is just set up to crush, and I know he's going to be expensive, so we'll just kind of have to see if a lot of the field is taking Derrick Henry. I think that might be the main decision point, but Flowers was also very impressive. He was kind of their clear number one, but a lot of it came after the catch.
Yeah, he did have 9 targets and 7 catches, so he had a great night. Derrick Henry's price tag worries me at 8,200. I need you to do even better than you did last week when you had 169 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns, because I need you to hit like 40 points to pay off that 8,200 price tag. I don't think he gets there 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah, a bet on Henry is kind of a bet against the other running backs and just saying that he's just so significantly better, even if he doesn't hit that number, because the other ones fail. Maybe there's no other good options to pivot to.
Yeah, but they've got a couple of other good running backs, and I just don't think that they need to do much to win this game, is the problem.
The other
How
thing
about,
on, just on Cleveland, is their defense looked much better than they were last year. They held Cincinnati to 7 yards in the second half. So I think the defense is much improved. You still got Myles Garrett holding down the end, and they might just be able to slow down enough. So you might just get the under, and they don't. It's comfortable. It's sitting at like 14 points the entire game, and then the game just ends.
yeah, it's going to be a slow game, I think, kind of like we saw against Cincinnati last week, and it's just another slugfest that doesn't produce a whole lot, and the Ravens come out on top. On the Cleveland side, what did you think about tight end Harold Fanning?
Yeah, he is very interesting. So in college, he came out of Bowling Green, but when you look at just his raw stats, he was like the best tight end ever. And just his yards, his touchdown, yeah, it was against inferior opponent, but he crushed them. And he was basically their only like offensive player, and they would force the ball to it. The defense knew where it was going, and he would still just have success every single game. But when you're playing at Bowling Green, there's going to be a lot of questions of can you do it in the NFL? It was amazing to see 9 targets in the first game, and it kind of stole him from Njoku. Njoku did not have a great day. He was one of the plays that we liked because honestly, I was ignoring Harold Fannin. I didn't think he would be heavily involved in the offense week one. So for a rookie, I'm buying it. I just don't want it against a Baltimore defense.
I agree with all that, and I got burned by Njoku last week too. I was all over Njoku. I like his price tag. Harold Fanning is at 3,100. That's a great price for a tight end that got 9 targets last week. And we all know how Flacco is. Flacco zeroes in on somebody, and that's, who he's going to use. I don't know exactly why that happens to Flacco, but it tends to. Now, maybe it changes from game to game and he zeroes in on somebody else or how they're playing against that person and the defense, and that's what he's zeroing in on. But Fanning had a great week, and we're definitely going to have to watch him. I don't mind playing him at 3,100.
No, especially in PPR for DraftKings.
Yep. Let's move on to Carolina at Arizona. Carolina lost that bad game to Jacksonville, and Arizona pulled out a squeaker against the Saints. Arizona's favored at home by 6.5. Over-unders 44.5. These two teams didn't look as good as we expected from either of them last week. Maybe it's just week one. The Cardinals, several players sick with a bug going around, and they were playing even though they were sick. And Carolina had that weather delay. Those are my excuses for these two teams.
They did have the weather delay. The other thing I want to bring up for Carolina is the Panthers left tackle, who's actually one of the better left tackles, Akeem I'm forgetting his last name, but he had an appendectomy, so he missed the last game, and that led to a lot of pressure on Bryce Young's blind side. Jacksonville was basically getting in like every other play, and he really was never comfortable in the pocket. This team was also heavily missing Coker and Thielen of just having those outlet passes. Was kind of I liked what I saw from T Mac, but Leggett did not look good, and they really just don't have enough bodies there to have a competent passing game right now.
Yeah, they don't. They were leaning on Chuba Hubbard again. He got 16 carries. He looked good, but just not that good. He
So,
was also involved in the passing game. Chuba Hubbard had a receiving touchdown.
yeah, he did. It was basically late in the game when it was kind of garbage time, and they were just trying to put up some points to make it look a little closer than it was. The main matchup that I'm interested in here is I think the strength of the Cardinals is their rushing attack between Trey Benson, Kyler, and James Conner. And this is like a historically bad rushing defense. You know, it was one of the like it set records for how bad it was last year, and they brought in some key defenders to make it better this year, but they're already hurt. So you had uh, Warden come over from the Chiefs, and he is going to miss 2 to 4 weeks. And they already looked really bad against the Jags and letting ETN rush everywhere. So, of those players, Connor, Benson, Kyler, are you interested in that rushing attack?
I have a lot of interest in Trey Benson. His price tag 4,600, and it looks like it's a 2/3, 1/3 maybe split back there, maybe a little bit more even, 60-40. It was 12 and 8. So rushing attempts. It's clear that James Conner is not the sole back in this offense any longer, that they're going to bring in Trey Benson. And we discussed that all in preseason. I did think it was going to be James Conner and that Trey Benson was going to be pushed back again to wait until there was an injury to James Conner, but week 1 did not show us that.
Also, Trey Benson was a lot more effective on the ground, too. So Connor had 12 carries, but only 39 yards. Meanwhile, Trey Benson almost had 70 on just the 8 carries. So I think he's the explosive one and like a really fun tournament play, especially for a cheap running back.
Yeah, he ripped off a 52-yard run. That was his long one. So he definitely is showing that he's the explosive back, and they'll probably reward him with that, especially if this ends up being a close game and they can run, which they should be able to. Then I think they go a little bit more even to Trey Benson. So Trey Benson is in my lineups because I think he's such a good piece at that price in this matchup, too.
The last thing I want to kind of note before we leave this game is Marvin Harrison. Marvin Harrison, I know this wasn't a game that was on a lot of people's radar when they were playing the Saints week 1, but he looked good. He looked faster, and they were designing more touches for him. And that chemistry just seemed to be a little bit better. They had a couple plays where Kyler missed him wide open, but Kyler missed him a little bit high on what could have been like a 90-yard touchdown. And if he has that and he goes for 160 week 1, then there's no way we get him at a 5,800 price tag. So it was really encouraging to see. I want to take a couple shots this week and just say that maybe he is their true option. He was drafted to be that guy. So why not in year 2?
He definitely was. And I think we all forgot that. We drafted him last year high and got burned. And so now everyone's off of Marvin Harrison Jr. But I do like him, and he did look a lot better last week. It is a little bit of deja vu for Trey McBride. He led in targets and receptions, but got left out on the touchdowns.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to pay off a 6,000 price tag for a tight end.
Yeah, we've got better, cheaper options, I think, for our tight ends. Let's move on to the New York Giants at the Dallas Cowboys. The Giants looked really bad against the Commanders, losing in that game, and Dallas looked better. They still had that lightning delay, but two teams that lost last week, somebody gets a win this week. Dallas is favored at home by 6, and the over-under is 44.5. What did you like out of either of these teams?
Honestly, I thought Dak looked very good. I was impressed with his pocket mobility. I thought he looked great. CeeDee Lamb was kind of the more worrisome one on the offense, but I'm confident that we're going to see same old CeeDee Lamb here soon. I saw he was the first one back at practice the next day, practicing on the jugs machine. I think he just expects more of himself. I think that'll return to form. The Giants, that's a lot harder to name A bright side there, it was rough with Russell Wilson. I think maybe the brightest side is we're getting one game closer to Jackson Dart or Jameis Winston, but that's about it.
Yeah, it sounds like it's going to be Jackson Dart. I mean, they scratched Jameis Winston last week. He was a healthy scratch, and they tempted us with a late release press teaser that we were going to see a few plays of Jackson Dart, which we didn't get. I'm excited to see him. He was fun to watch in preseason, and I really just don't want to watch this Giants team without him. Russell Wilson looked like Russell Wilson from Denver and not the Russell Wilson that we saw last year in Pittsburgh. Malik Neighbors was targeted 12 times, but he only caught 5 of them. They were a little off target.
Yeah. And Russell Wilson was just throwing him like plays where he had no right catching it. He wasn't open at all. They were just trying to force it to Neighbors, which I get trying to force it to your best player, but they just don't have a lot of weapons. They don't have good quarterback play. And it's kind of what we thought. Like their defense looked pretty good against Jaden Daniels. And they got to him a couple times. That defensive line got some good pressures, but they're just not going to have an offense to be competitive in a lot of these games.
I don't like the price of the good players in these games. CeeDee Lamb at 7,800. He's going to have 2 or 3 touchdowns and a 100-yard day. He could get it, but like you said, the Giants defense wasn't that bad. It was just their offense was super, super bad. How about Javonte Williams? That was a little bit of a surprise that he is it.
He was, and he honestly looked pretty good in some of his carries. We see these veteran players show up, especially in the early parts of the season. He's their goal line back. If we think this is going to be a positive game script for them and they're going to be up ahead in the second half, 5,800 is a pretty good price tag for a running back favored at home.
It is. I don't mind that price tag at all, but it's still the Giants and Dallas, and I don't know. I'm not buying into it.
Yeah, the only other surprise for Dallas was the amount of Cavante Turpin touches. They were like using him in motion on like every play, and he was a lot more than just their kick returner. He was their like wide receiver 3. So he's interesting at one of those cheap options. I mean, you got Pickens there, but Pickens didn't look that good to me. And I think there's probably just better options on the slate. But something I want to watch is, are they going to keep using Turpin like that? Or is that we want to beat the Eagles week 1? And that's our game plan.
Yeah, I want to see more out of the Cowboys without a lightning delay before I start using them in my lineups. Let's move on. The New England Patriots at the Miami Dolphins. Both of these teams were surprisingly disappointing last week. Miami is favored. They're at home. They're favored by 1.5. And the over-under is 43.5. I don't like this game. I guess I like the New England side of it a little bit more. I can't believe how bad the Dolphins looked against the Colts last week and how great they made Daniel Jones look. This was super surprising to me, and I feel like that the team has given up. The players have given up on Mike McDaniel and that they want him gone.
Yeah, that locker room seems to be kind of a mess with Tyreek Hill too. I don't think that team's very resilient. We saw them, as soon as it goes bad, it's going to get worse, I think is the motto for Miami. But I still think they have the potential to have some good outputs, especially every week 1. Like every team throughout the season is going to have their terrible games, but it seems to matter so much more when it's week 1 and it's our 1 game sample that we have of you. If we just say that maybe the Dolphins are somewhere in the middle, maybe they're a bad team, but they're not. They're better than what we saw in Indy. I think this could be a fun game against New England and a little bit more back and forth. Historically, these are the games where the Dolphins do well. These are the games where they put up 45 points and put up crazy totals at home early in the season. So I think Tyreek Hill is interesting. I don't think anyone's really going to play him. Could be kind of fun. Gino was airing it out against New England's defense, and especially with Christian Gonzalez, their number 1 cornerback out. You could do worse than Tyreek Hill. I could be talked into it.
You could do worse than Tyreek Hill. I'm looking at his price tag, 6,400. I mean, obviously Tyreek Hill can make those numbers if he's getting targeted. He only had 6 targets and 4 catches for 40 yards last week. Something's got to change, or Mike McDaniels is going to go out first in the NFL.
Yeah. The
What
other
do you like
name,
on what do you like on the New England side?
the other name I want to mention for New England is Kayshon Boutte. He is a third-year player, but I was kind of digging more into his background. He's out of LSU, which we love our LSU wide receivers. He actually played above Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. in his last senior season, but then he had a pretty bad injury and he had to have ankle surgery, took him off the field for the rest of that, and it basically threw out his rookie season. If we just look at him like a second-year player, we completely threw out that rookie season where he hardly played. He had about 600 yards last year, and he showed some promise, especially at the end of the season. He was their number one receiver last week. He had over 100 yards. He actually has like the talent profile. He just went in the sixth round because of those injury concerns. I think it's something that I kind of want to take a couple shots this week and buy in that that's true. And he has progressed. He's healthier. He knows the system and maybe can step into that role for a team that really needs a number one option to let Drake May develop.
Yeah, they definitely need that number one option. Stefan Diggs led in targets for the team with 7, but he wasn't super impressive. So maybe it will be Keishon Butte. DraftKings realized that he had a good game and they bumped his salary $700 to $4,500 this week. Last week he didn't find the end zone. He'll definitely need to find it to pay off that $4,500 price tag, more than the 38 that he had last week. But I can see where he can get in the end zone and have another 100-yard day, and then he's worth his 4,500.
Yeah, if this game actually turns into a shootout, I think he's going to be part of it and heavily involved. I'm actually interested in stacking up this game and running a Drake May, Kayshon Boutte, and Tyreek Hill stack. That leaves you a lot of money to spin up elsewhere and get those true stars like Jamar Chase or Derrick Henry. It's
Yeah,
interesting, especially if this game is better than what people think.
that's very true. Let's move on. Denver at Indianapolis. Both teams are 1-0. Denver is favored by 2, and the over under is 42.5. Colts surprised me last week by looking so good. Their defense especially.
Yeah, I really liked the changes that Lou Anarumo, their new defensive coordinator, made. He had Tua in hell last week. Like Tua had no idea where the blitz was going to come from,
Yeah.
what the coverage was, and was picked off a couple times. Also, Bo Nix looked pretty shaky. If Bo Nix is a little shaky and he's not fully prepared for what Indy is going to throw at him, 2,600 for the Colts defense is a fun price tag.
It is. They're my lowest cost defense that I want to play this week. But I feel like Denver made so many mistakes last week against Tennessee. I thought they were going to lose that game, which was my survivor pick. So thank goodness they didn't. But it was very shaky the way that the Denver offense looked last week. And you, by the way, nailed RJ Harvey's carries. You told us that Peyton would only let him run a few times, that he wasn't going to get just let turned loose, and he only got to run 6 times, but he got 70 yards,
Yeah,
but he only 6 carries.
he was highly effective, but he saw less snaps than Tyler Bidet. Sean Payton hates his rookies, and he like always has. I still don't think that's really going to change this week, too. I don't have much interest in RJ Harvey. I also don't really have much interest in Dobbins, just in this matchup. Is there anyone for Denver's offense that you're curious about, or on the Colts either?
I'm not really. We saw the Colts defense do a good job against the run and the pass last week. They didn't let Achan get too crazy. I think he was worth like a little over 13 points, but nothing worked very well for the Dolphins last week. And Denver, even if they clean it up, they're still making mistakes. They made, I don't know, 4 or 5. They had like 4 turnovers last week. If they don't even have half of that, the Colts win this game.
Yeah.
Anyone that you want to play in this game?
I'm not playing Daniel Jones. I just think the Broncos defense is elite. They are a top tier defense. I don't like them in that matchup. The one player that I'm very open about for the Colts is Tyler Warren at 4,500. When we talk about the difference between Tyler Warren and honestly Trey McBride, like we know they're both going to be heavily involved in the offense. We know they're going to get those easy targets, rack up receptions. I think you're getting a $1,500 discount. And I think he's going to be a large part of their red zone game plan. We saw him line up as a fullback and get carries. This team just wants to find ways to give him the ball. So 4,500, I don't think that price is quite right. And it's probably just a discount because it's his second game, but the team wants to feature him.
They definitely do. I do love Warren. He is one that I picked up in a lot of my leagues, and I do like him at 4,500. He's just got to find the end zone this week, which he didn't do last week, but he still had 9 targets, 7 receptions, and 76 yards. So get me 24 more yards and a touchdown, and that price is well paid for. I don't like Sutton. Sutton was well used last week with 9 targets, but 6,300.
Yeah,
I
too
feel
expensive
like
for. We brought up a lot of
Yeah.
values on this slate.
Yeah. So I'm staying away pretty much from everyone else. And I'm still not 100% bought into Michael Pittman. And at 5,100, I just have other places. It's not that I don't like him, but it's just that I have other places that I do like the wide receivers at that price better.
Completely agree.
All right, we're getting towards the bottom. San Francisco, they pulled out the squeaker in Seattle, much to my surprise. So they're 1-0, and they are heading into New Orleans at 0-1. That looked much better than I thought they were going to. 49ers are obviously favored by 4.5. Over-unders 42.5. It was quite a surprise to me that the Saints let Spencer Rattler throw the ball 46 times last week.
Yeah, they were letting him have a chance. And honestly, he didn't look as bad as I thought it would. Maybe he's a better fit in Kellen Moore's scheme, and they seem to be giving him some easier looks with Olave and Kamara.
Yeah, he was, I think, at about a 58% completion rate, which for Spencer Rattler was pretty good. And they let him try, and he almost won that game for him.
Yeah. I can't believe it's week 2, and we're getting a potential Mac Jones versus Spencer Rattler NFL game. This is what we waited all off season for. The 49ers are so banged up coming into this game. So George Kittle is going to miss a couple weeks. Juwan Jennings, I think, is going to be out as well. And then it came out today that Purdy could miss multiple weeks. So I don't think he's going to play this game. And that means we're going to have Mac Jones, Ricky Pearsall, and Christian McCaffrey lining up for the 49ers. So Christian McCaffrey already led the NFL in touches last week, and now they have a backup quarterback in. I don't think they're going to give him any rest.
Yeah, I don't think they are either, but I still don't like paying up for him in this situation. I think the only way that this goes fairly well for the 49ers is their defense steps up and wins this game for them. So this is the defense that I want to pay up for at 3,600 because I think it's going to be known that they're going to want to lean on them, that we need you to shut down this opposing offense, which you are totally capable of shutting down Spencer Rattler and the Saints. And this ends up a 13-0 game.
The only other note I want to say before we leave it is Ricky Pearsall. I just think he's too cheap for how good he's been in his last stretch of games. He went over 100 yards last game. I thought he looked clearly their best wide receiver, and now you have no George Kittle out there. And we saw Mac Jones. Mac Jones helped Brian Thomas Jr. have a great 2024. So there is potential. You know, it never sounds good when the backup quarterback's coming in, but the one thing Mac Jones typically does is hyper target that number one wide receiver. And if it is clearly Pearsall on this team, then he is too cheap at his price.
What do you think of backup tight end Jake Tongas for the 49ers at 3,200? He came in, he had a touchdown in the game after Kittle went out. So do you like him at all? He's probably played with Mac Jones.
He probably has. He's probably getting those second stream reps, but the touchdown that he caught was a weird play. Purdy scrambled forever, and it looked like he threw a pick, and then Tongas snatched it for the game-winning touchdown. But I'm probably not going back to him. I think if I had to bet, that's probably one of his very few touchdowns this season, and I'm not going to bet on him repeating this week.
Okay, we'll go somewhere else. I'll probably, other than the defense, just go somewhere else for most of my players. How about the Rams at Tennessee? Oh, this one sounds painful. Watching Tennessee last week was painful, and now they're going to play the Rams. They do get to go home. Rams are favored by 5.5, 41.5 over under. Do you like anyone here?
Speaking of good defenses, I like the Rams at 3,100 against Cam Ward. They're gonna have Cam Ward chuck it. He is kind of has the free pass to make as many mistakes as he wants this year. I feel like this team knows they're not going to be very good, and they just really want him to air it out and get some experience. So the only other thing is Alec Iomanor, their rookie wide receiver. We talked all offseason that this team wants to lean into that change and find the rookie pieces, and he was their number one target in week one. So it's a really good Denver Broncos defense that they had to debut against. But Ao Manor had 7 targets, and he was responsible for 46% of the team's air yards. So if those actually get converted, I think he only came down with one or two of those passes for 15. He had 2 receptions for 15 yards, but he was targeted and involved a lot more than those stats show. I still don't like him here against a Rams defense that I think is going to put pressure on Cam Ward. But some name to keep an eye out for as we go into the later weeks.
All right. I do like Kyron Williams. I think that he's going to get the ball a lot as they try to run out this game and get it over with. He just needs at his 6,300 to have that touchdown and hit that 100 yards. So he definitely could do that. Although the Tennessee defense was a Tennessee defense last week making the Broncos make mistakes, or were the Broncos just making mistakes?
Yeah, it
Or
seemed
we'll
more on the
find out this week.
Broncos. But I like Kyron. He's probably one of my best bets for getting a touchdown this week. And we've seen him show up in good lineups in the past, basically because of that. He falls into the end zone twice and is one of the key plays.
Yep. Final game. Seattle Seahawks are traveling to the East Coast to play the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh pulled out the last minute win over the Jets, and the Seahawks lost at home to the 49ers. Pittsburgh's favored by 3, over under of 40. What do you like here? I was so disappointed last week when the Jets, when the Pittsburgh
Beat
beat the
them.
Jets. It was just, and I've never watched a game where I felt like the losing team was such the better team. But Aaron Rodgers got it done. He had 4 passing touchdowns. Arthur Smith is driving us crazy again. This time he's not going to use Caleb Johnson. Where do you fall on
Yeah,
this?
I don't think Aaron Rodgers repeats at all. I don't think he has a shot getting back to 4 touchdowns. Touchdowns just really aren't that predictable on a week to week basis. And I think this team still wants to lean into the run. Like you're saying, Caleb Johnson is not part of this rushing attack. I think it does make Warren interesting just as a clear back that's a home favorite. And he's pretty cheap. He's kind of like Javante, like we were talking about. So I think he's, let's see, 5,400.
Yeah, 5,400.
Yeah, so 5,400 for a kind of true number one running back at home. I like it. I'm also very curious about Charbonnet. Charbonnet looked like the better runner, and we wanted pieces of the Seattle attack. And we saw Brees Hall have a lot of good plays against it. And I think Charbonnet is who I prefer over Ken Walker. Ken Walker did not look great last week.
Yeah, he didn't. It was very surprising to see how even this split was. So we'll see what the usage is going forward. But Charbonnet was definitely the better running back for the Seahawks. How about Jackson Smith Najigba having 13 targets?
Yeah,
Was
he
that
was.
just what they
He had,
needed to do last week, or do you like
there's
him?
no way that is sustainable, and they have to remember they have other receivers on this team because yeah, he had 57% target share on the team. Your elite wide receiver ones are about 30%, and he had almost double that. He also had 90% of the team's air yards, which is insane. You're basically playing with one wide receiver out there, and the other team knows it. So there's no way that can continue. I think his workload honestly makes him interesting, especially maybe more in the cash side, because I don't think this is going to be a great game environment. But that usage is ridiculous and something we really haven't seen. I also don't think he can stay healthy if he's that
Yeah.
pivotal to this passing attack. So I don't really like him at 6K, but I understand him for like cash lineups.
Yeah, I'm kind of staying away from this game, but do we get Metcalf's revenge, or do we get JSN having a great game, or is this game just a big dud? And that's kind of where I am on this game, is a big dud.
which is what we thought of Pittsburgh last week. So we'll see if we can go 1 for 2.
Exactly. If we don't, then maybe on, week 3, we're going to be chasing them and going, yeah, we were just wrong. Do you have a lineup for us this week?
Yeah, so I am fully in on that Jacksonville Cincinnati game. I think those teams are going to rebound heavily. And the way I was stacking it up in this lineup is Burrow, Jamar Chase, and Brian Thomas Jr., and then T. Higgins as well. So fully in. And then even leaning in to try to separate myself from the field is adding Britton Strange as my tight end. So I have 5 pieces from this game. And just say, I'm not interested in the other games. We talked about a lot of unders. A lot of unders hit last game, and we need the one game that goes off. I'm calling it to be this game. And then to round it out, my 2 running backs, I like Trey Benson, that explosive rushing attack against Carolina. And then Chris McCaffrey's workload should just make him an elite option for running back. So I'm taking the workload with Christian McCaffrey. My last piece, we didn't really mention him, but it's actually one of those cheap options. Maybe I'll mix it up. We talked about a lot of good pump plays, but right now I have Troy Franklin in there for the Broncos. He's just very cheap and he's kind of flying under the radar with a $3,700 price tag. This team traded away Vele, and I think he can be that complement to Sutton. I don't really like Sutton that much, so Troy Franklin filling in the flex at 3,700. And lastly, for my defense, going with the Rams, I'm going back against Cam Ward again and taking a really good defense, and that's going to have them under pressure.
Yeah, I have a lot of this similar pieces in my lineups, and we'll put a couple of these up so everyone can see them. But I like Burrow, going with Burrow and Chase and Strange as well on the other side. And then I love Travis Etienne just from his workload and how well he was running. And he seems to just be their go-to back. And we saw Cleveland be able to run against Cincinnati last week. And then I'm also on the Trey Benson bandwagon. His price is just too good for that Carolina matchup where they're splitting the carries. I like Rome Odunze. I don't know that we talked a lot about him, but his usage, I do like his $4,800 price tag for Odunze in that Detroit game. That could also be the one that went off. And then I think I just targeted workload because I've got Hollywood Brown in there as well at 5,200. And then I had enough to spend for CD Lamb at 7,800.
Having CD Lamb and Jamar Chase, those could be 50 to 60 points by themselves.
It could be. So I do like this lineup. I went with the 49ers defense at 3,600 and paid up, but I was able to afford all of that, which was kind of impressive.
Yeah. So thank you for sticking in there with us. That is our week 2 main slate. Hope you enjoyed all of our game reviews. It is fun to talk about. Please hit subscribe and leave us a comment of your favorite plays of the week and which names that we brought up that are now on your radar.
Yeah, next up we'll have an episode on our favorite prop bets. It will not be this long. So the prop bets for week 2 that we like, we did pretty well last week in week 1. So be sure to tune into that if you live in a state where you can gamble. Good luck this week, and we'll see you on the props episode.